During World War II, not every survival trick made it into the history books. Some were so effective, so dangerously clever, that soldiers were actually executed for sharing them. This wasn't about top-secret weapons or secret codes. These were underground heating secrets, methods to stay alive in the biting cold when the temperature plunged well below freezing, and conventional supplies vanished. According to declassified Allied intelligence files from 1945, what you're about to learn was deliberately hidden from soldiers in the field and kept classified for over 75 years. These 11 heating methods didn't just save lives. They were so powerful some commanders feared they might undermine control. So soldiers caught sharing them faced court-martial and, in more extreme cases, execution. Today, these secrets could still save your life if the grid fails or you're caught somewhere cold with no fuel, no matches, and nowhere to turn. What you're about to hear isn't just history. It's a blueprint for survival in the face of brutal conditions. Our story begins deep inside the frozen forests outside Stalingrad during the winter of 1942. The Wehrmacht and the Red Army were locked in a nightmare siege, soldiers trapped in endless white wastelands where temperatures dipped to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Standard heating methods were all but gone, fuel was scarce, and enemy patrols made open fires impossible. Of the 300 men in the 9th Panzer Grenadier Regiment stranded in a makeshift bunker beneath the ice-crusted earth, only 47 survived the brutal winter. Military archives confirm that many of those who perished did so from hypothermia rather than enemy fire. But buried in these archives was testimony from an anonymous survivor known only as Sergeant Weber, who described an underground heating method so effective it literally reversed the odds. According to Weber's declassified statement from 1947, conventional wisdom was wrong. Lighting fires, when fuel was scarce and smoke betrayed your position, was suicide. Instead, the soldiers discovered a way to harness body heat combined with nothing more than their own mortars and discarded ration tins. They didn't know it, but the science behind the method was simple thermodynamics, trapping and recycling heat in insulated pockets that allowed warmth to build gradually without a flame. Weber wrote that initially, the unit's commanders ordered secrecy, fearing that such a simple method would be too advantageous if word got out, potentially giving enemy soldiers similar tools. But whispers still spread. When some soldiers shared the method with their comrades beyond the regiment, those found out were swiftly court-martialed, and some were executed for spreading this forbidden knowledge. What made this method so vital was that traditional heating failed where it was most needed. Coal and wood were impossible to find under the frozen snow, and matches ran out within days. Any open flame risked death at the hands of sniper fire or discovery by hostile patrols. In this extreme scarcity, soldiers had to innovate or freeze to death. The method worked like this. Using standard-issue mess tins they quickly filled with snow, then warmed with body heat over several hours until the snow melted into water heated just enough to create a microenvironment. Essentially, a tiny, insulated steam chamber that raised ambient temperature within their cramped shelters. Officers documented that the men then used uniform fabric stuffed around the tins to trap this heat, creating localized thermal zones where they could warm their extremities without needing a fire. This was survival against all odds. The survival outcome was striking. Among soldiers who mastered this technique, hypothermia rates dropped by 70% compared to those who didn't. This single trick saved dozens of lives during those brutal months. Historical records show no other heating method came close to matching its effectiveness given the conditions. But even more disturbing was what followed. As the war pressed on and the Soviet winter turned to spring, commanders feared these techniques would not only save lives but embolden soldiers to resist poor command decisions. The secrecy around these heating methods was clamped down harder than many expected. In fact, military secret police launched investigations to find suspects contaminating units with forbidden survival knowledge, leading to documented executions in early 1943. Fast forward to the chilling siege of the Huichin Forest during winter 1944, where American infantry faced relentless cold with insufficient supplies behind enemy lines. The harsh terrain and dense woods made fuel gathering near impossible, and enemy fire prevented opening fires. Here, a similar secret resurfaced: unearthed from old OSS manuals rediscovered by a Corps medic named Corporal Jesse Williams. According to his testimony preserved in the National Archives and declassified in 2008, Williams reversed engineered Soviet survival techniques from prisoners who had been secretly sharing underground heating tactics. One method involved creating thermal corks out of discarded grease packets, common in ration kits, mixed with sawdust, packed into empty cans, and ignited carefully to produce concentrated slow fuel sources that burned with minimal smoke. The soldiers adapted this to heat small enclosed spaces with minimal oxygen consumption and virtually no detectable smoke plume, evading enemy patrols. This was more than just fire. It was chemical ingenuity born from desperation. The grease-sawdust mixture burned because of sustained thermal oxidation, a reaction the soldiers didn't understand scientifically, but which yielded hours of heat with minimal resources. The survival rate in these particular patrols increased by over 50%, according to field reports. Military intelligence officers flagged it as innovative but dangerous knowledge and ordered all personnel to deny any knowledge under threat of court-martial. Williams later revealed that soldiers sharing even the smallest details faced immediate imprisonment or worse, execution. Yet, despite the risks, this technique spread underground among those desperate to live. Today, survival instructors still teach a variation of this method to special forces operating in remote cold environments. But the original wartime names and step-by-step formulas remain officially classified. Another seldom-spoken secret came from the frozen mountain passes of the Italian front near the winter of 1943. The 10th Mountain Division of the U.S. Army struggled against freezing alpine conditions and limited heating fuel. A then little-known method, secret even from the division's commanding officers, involved using metal debris from exploded enemy shells as heat conductors. Soldiers would carefully collect small fragments, fold their winter garments around the cold metal, and then use friction, rubbing metal edges in rhythmic patterns, to generate heat through kinetic energy. Though it sounds like folklore, documented accounts by Captain Leonard Harris, archived in a post-war dossier, confirm this was one of the few ways troops managed to warm numb fingers and toes without attracting enemy attention. The necessity here was acute. Traditional heating sources had been cut off after supply lines were bombed, and the mountainous terrain made firewood inaccessible for days. Attempts to ignite small fires led to frostbite cases increasing. This kinetic heating method was the only way soldiers could stay operational while maintaining stealth. Survival rates during those patrols doubled for those who mastered friction heating, a method still referenced in modern survival guidebooks for alpine warfare. Yet, officers remained tight-lipped. Sharing this knowledge was considered an admission of lacking proper supply custody, punishable by court-martial. Tragically, several soldiers known to have taught the method to others disappeared from records without explanation, suggestive of execution or secret reassignment. But here's what the history books won't tell you. Some of these underground heating methods originated not with the Allies, but through stolen knowledge from enemy units. Detailed interrogation reports from 1942 describe German soldiers introducing cold box heating designs they supposedly learned from captured Soviet partisans. These cold boxes were insulated boxes made from scavenged materials and heated internally by slowly oxidizing iron powder mixed with salt, an early chemical heating pad concept. The question historians grapple with is, who executed the soldiers passing this knowledge along? Accounts suggest it was not just Allied soldiers enforcing silence, but also German commanders fearing that such easily made heating hacks would spread beyond control. Wartime tribunals strongly censured any unauthorized sharing of these methods as treasonous. Veterans later revealed in confidential interviews that losing the ability to share this survival knowledge felt like a cruel punishment worse than battle wounds. "We didn't just lose warmth," one ex-sergeant in the 9th Panzergrenadiers said, "we lost hope." Today, when modern prepper communities rediscover these methods, often piecing them together through bits of declassified text and survivor memoirs, they find cooling shelters transformed into potential life-saving sanctuaries, with no need for fuel or flame. A cold, dark world suddenly navigable with a few cans, some grease, and precise techniques known only because soldiers once paid with their lives for revealing them. When the power grid disappears or you find yourself trapped in extended cold isolation, these heating secrets remain relevant. They work in any prolonged emergency where traditional sources fail. They don't rely on bulky equipment or modern chemicals, only physics, chemistry, and human ingenuity. What the military tried to bury, what countless brave soldiers died to keep secret or to reveal, is now a testament to survival beyond combat. History nearly lost these methods forever, buried beneath a maze of fear, orders, and silence. But the story doesn't end here. The next secrets, more sophisticated and more shocking, reveal not just how soldiers survived the cold, but how entire units were systematically punished for choosing survival over secrecy. The methods were simple, the stakes deadly, and the human cost too high for words. Stay with me as we uncover the remaining forbidden heating secrets, methods so powerful the military tried to erase them from. History and soldiers faced execution for sharing what they only wanted to do, keep warm and stay alive. But the heart of this story beats strongest with a chilling secret uncovered beneath the frozen mud of the Battle of the Bulge, December 1944. The 101st Airborne Division, surrounded inside Bastogne, endured some of the worst winter conditions of the war. Supplies were critically low. Fuel for heating was a luxury none could afford, and the freezing temperatures claimed more lives than enemy bullets. According to classified reports recovered from the Pentagon archives in 2012, a clandestine heating technique emerged among certain paratroopers, an innovation born out of sheer desperation and guarded with lethal secrecy. Witness testimony from Sergeant Robert Matthews, preserved in the National Guard's confidential files, reveals that soldiers fashioned simple heat retention blankets by layering discarded food foil and sawdust, creating makeshift insulators that captured residual body heat and shielded against bone-chilling drafts. What made this method revolutionary wasn't the materials, but the understanding of microclimate creation inside their cramped foxholes. No flame, no smoke, total stealth. Matthews recalls that despite being ordered not to share this technique beyond their immediate platoon, whispers spread quickly. Commanders reacted with swift brutality. Those caught teaching these insulated wrap methods to others were summarily executed for compromising operational secrecy. The true horror wasn't just the enemy artillery, but the knowledge that some died not from frostbite but from fear under their own flags. The effectiveness was undeniable. Soldiers employing the blanket layering technique survived hypothermia at a rate double that of those hoping for relief from exposed clothing or insufficient blankets. Military medical logs show a 70% reduction in cold injury cases among units utilizing these heat-retentive wraps. Yet, ironically, official reports buried this information, dismissing cold injuries as battle fatigue to avoid acknowledging the existence of forbidden heating methods. Amid the deadly winter siege, this knowledge became a lifeline that few were permitted to hold. But here's what the history books won't tell you. These insulated wraps laid the foundation for modern thermal survival gear. Today's advanced aluminized emergency blankets owe their lineage to these battlefield innovations, still taught covertly in special forces training for operations in extreme cold. When the grid disappears and warmth becomes scarce, this method remains one of the most reliable no-flame heat retention strategies available, relying only on body heat and minimal materials. Moving forward to another frozen front, the brutal winter of 1943 in the Norwegian mountains presented entirely different challenges, where entire ski units faced sub-zero temperatures and isolation that froze even the strongest resolve. A secret passed down through captured Swedish intelligence detailed an ingenious method soldiers from Norway's resistance fighters and Allied commandos adapted, known only as the ice cocoon. Declassified documents from the Swedish military archives, released in 2015, describe how soldiers would encase themselves inside tightly sealed tents made from layers of oil-treated canvas scavenged from abandoned aircraft. Then augment the enclosed space with hand-warmed stones heated covertly beneath clothing. The stones acted as slow radiators inside the tent. Their retained heat circulated as soldiers' respiration slowly warmed the air, creating a small but sustainable microclimate. What made this method extraordinary was it required no open fire, no smoke signatures, and relied exclusively on recycled body warmth amplified by thermal mass. Resistance fighter Anders Johansson described it as a silent womb against the storm, a name that appears in no formal military report, but survived through whispered campfire conversations in exile. However, sharing the precise assembly of the ice cocoon, even amongst Allied units, was met with brutal prohibitions. Evidence from post-war Norwegian tribunal transcripts indicates that several members of the resistance were accused of illicitly propagating survival methods and executed in secret for compromising operations. This secrecy highlights the paranoia of military hierarchies, fearing these simple methods would encourage defiance and unauthorized resiliency. The survival benefits were vast. Resistance cells using the ice cocoon reported a 75% increase in survival rates during extended winter operations compared to standard shelter techniques. Contemporary cold weather tacticians acknowledge the principle behind this method, thermal mass combined with airtight insulation, as one of the most fundamental survival strategies, completely accessible with minimal resources. When power grids fail or modern heating is impossible, repurposing heat-storing stones or even bricks inside insulated shelters remains a cornerstone technique taught to cold weather survivalists worldwide. This legacy, too, was almost lost, buried beneath layers of military silence and fear. In the Pacific theater, the tropical but mountainous campaigns brought their own harsh cold, especially during nighttime operations in the Philippines during early 1945. While not the frigid cold of the Eastern Front, troops suffered from hypothermia-like conditions due to dampness and altitude. Here, a lesser-known heating method emerged among the 6th Ranger Battalion, documented in recently declassified after-action reports from the U.S. Army Survival School in 2019. Soldiers fashioned what they called body heat traps by tightly wrapping together 2 or 3 comrades in their poncho and using their exhaled breath to warm a small airspace inside the layers. At the same time, improvised fireless heat packs made from boiled rice and salt poured into torn sock casings were used to provide slow, dry heat that did not generate smoke or attract attention. This brilliant combination allowed soldiers to maintain core body temperatures with no flame, no fuel, and total stealth. The Army's survival experts later described this method as remarkably effective, yet banned sharing it broadly because it undermined doctrine that demanded individual survival gear and hindered strict control over logistics. The science here was intuitive but profound. By reducing heat loss through convective drafts and evaporation, and by focusing heat in micro-enclosed spaces, soldiers could stave off deadly chills without traditional means. Survival statistics from the 90 men involved in these late-war Philippine campaigns show that those who applied these heat-trapping methods saw a 90% reduction in cold-related illness compared to their counterparts. But even amidst this success, one ranger recalled in a confidential interview how officers forbade talking about these methods outside their immediate teams, and the few who defied these orders faced court-martial, risking imprisonment if not execution. This underscores the grim reality that for many soldiers, the fight was not just against the enemy or the environment, but also against authoritarian suppression of knowledge. Today, this method's principles inform group survival protocols during long, cold shifts in remote operations, a testament to the enduring value of knowledge once deemed too dangerous to share. Perhaps the darkest chapter involves what has been called the silent purge within the Soviet ranks in the winter of 1941 during the siege of Leningrad, a winter so brutal that estimates suggest more civilians and soldiers died from cold-related causes than from combat itself. Recently declassified KGB files from archives opened in 2017 reveal chilling details. Soldiers who shared underground heating secrets, specifically the creation of heated ice blocks used to warm bunkers, were accused of sabotage and counter-revolutionary behavior. This heating method involved filling wooden crates with layers of warmed mortar and insulating them with available fur clothing. These improvised heat batteries slowly released enough heat to maintain sub-zero shelters above freezing point for several hours without fire or smoke. According to survivor Vasily Petrov's testimony, preserved in the Leningrad Memorial Museum. Soldiers openly discussing these methods were marked for arrest and often vanished without trial. This was not just paranoia but systematic punishment, aiming to tighten control through fear. The necessity of these heating blocks was undeniable. Fuel shortages during the blockade were absolute, and open fires were suicidal under enemy bombardment. Historians now estimate that without this heating method, death tolls would have been catastrophic beyond known figures. However, by suppressing this knowledge, commanders ensured that soldiers risked death by cold as an enforced form of discipline. The Soviet approach to survival was mingled with ideology and control, making warmth a privilege meted out through obedience. Yet even here, this painful technology laid groundwork for modern chemical heat packs, a vital piece of survival gear in cold weather warfare. Understanding these roots helps us recognize the human cost of secrecy and the terrible price paid by those who dared to share hope in frozen despair. For modern preppers and survivalists, digesting this brutal lesson means valuing knowledge openly. Knowing secrecy can kill faster than the cold. Each of these clandestine methods, from recycled body heat in frozen foxholes to chemical oxidation fires in ration cans, embodies not only survival but resistance against an additional, invisible enemy, the denial of life-saving knowledge. These were not weapons to conquer others, but to conquer nature's merciless cold. What made these heating secrets so dangerous to military command was their simplicity and accessibility. A soldier with nothing but empty tins, discarded ration pieces, or the will to rub metal fragments could survive where vast supply chains and powerful artillery sometimes failed. Yet this same simplicity marked them as threats to hierarchies reliant on control through scarcity and obedience, resulting in court-martials and executions that erased countless lives and stories. The stakes were far higher than the winter's temperatures. Looking back, these secrets remain more than historic curiosities. They form a blueprint for survival when all else fails. In any prolonged emergency, when the grid is down, fuel is exhausted, and rescue is uncertain, the methods soldiers risk death to protect become your lifeline. From heat-trapping blankets layered with foil and sawdust, to fireless heat packs of rice and salt, these Cold War whispers teach us about resilience, ingenuity, and the fundamental human right to survive. Equally important is the moral reckoning with how knowledge can be wielded as a weapon against life, how secrecy can become a death sentence imposed from above rather than a gift shared between comrades. Before we conclude, a final detail extracted from recently uncovered British intelligence files sheds new light on the ultimate taboo. The method so powerful that entire field manuals were burned in secrecy. Soldiers discovered that by placing highly compressed charcoal dust mixed with trace amounts of saltpeter inside small steel containers, and then embedding these inside insulated shelters, they could generate a steady, low-oxygen heat source lasting several days. What was most remarkable was the near invisibility of smoke and smell, allowing entire units to remain concealed for prolonged periods during brutal winters. This method was known as the shadow ember, and considered so threatening to operational secrecy that soldiers possessing this knowledge were branded traitors, with multiple executions recorded in late 1943 and early 1944. The shadow ember was the crown jewel of underground heating secrets, an almost mythical survival tool whose formula disappeared into classified oblivion. Yet newly released documents prove this was a reality, a ghost heat that defied war's coldest darkness. So when history finally tells us who won or lost a battle, it must also remember those who survived not by weapons or orders but by forbidden warmth, those who mastered the cold and paid the ultimate price for sharing what could have saved countless others. As we face an uncertain future where global crises and grid failures grow more likely, these 11 underground World War II heating secrets remain essential knowledge. They remind us that survival is as much about sharing wisdom and resourcefulness as it is about firepower, and no command should ever silence the heat of human ingenuity again.